So, Andrew, how are you and how's the family, mate?
Well, I'm good. I mean, I live in Devon now, and have been here for 15 years. So the family really is me and my wife and the two greyhounds that we've got down here. Daughter lives in London. She's a professional singer, and she's performed at the stadium far more recently than I've been in there, with different things that she's done. So no, yeah, we're great. I'm 61, coming on 62 now. Um, Older, slower, wiser, and far less asked than I used to be about anything.
I like that though. How it should be, mate, innit?
I hope so.
Yeah. So we'll go right back to the beginning, mate, and where was home for you and who lived at home with you?
Smythe Road in Holton View. Um, I was the last child of four. Um, Dad worked at Pilks Sullivan's, and worked there 42 years. So after the war, he was there. He ended up as he was a foreman, and then I think he ended up sort of as a head of something or other packing. But he
Yeah.
he he was 42 when I was born, so he retired at 58, and I was only 16 then. Mum
Yeah.
did have some jobs. She worked at the power station for a while as a guide, but she was largely a stay-at-home mum for most of my life, and then she got different jobs going on. I have a brother, Philip, who is 80 now and
Oh,
lives in Warrington.
yeah.
I have a sister
Listened.
I have a sister, Linda, who lives in Frodsham. She's 76 or 7. And I've got another
Yeah.
sister who lives in Holyhead, um,
Mm.
in Anglesey. She's 4 years older than me. Um, so really no links at all to Widnes anymore.
Yeah.
Dad died at 87, the year we moved down. In fact, I'd only been living here a couple of weeks, and he passed away. And then Mum had a stroke, and she was in a home for the last 4 years of her life, very badly affected by it. So we used to come up quite a bit then and stay first off in her house,
Mm.
and then when we sold that, we stayed in Frodsham. So yeah, grew up in Holton View, Smythe Road. I had, my mates were Phil Twist, Dave Cummins, Ian Melbourne. I know Melly is dead, but I don't know anything about the other two now. I
Okay.
went to Moorfield Road School,
Yeah.
um, and still have some friends that from there, and then went to Fairfield, where I was underwhelmingly successful in my exams.
Right.
I was far less bothered about that than I was about rugby and girls,
Yeah.
and then drinking.
Yeah.
And then went to the sixth form college where I had a great time, loved my time there, did okay, but was never academically brilliant. I was, I was clever. I had a smart mouth. I was quick-witted. I was big,
Yeah.
and I did all right at stuff. And then that's me really. That's where we're up to being 18, 19.
Yeah.
That was me.
Right. So when did rugby become a part of your life, Andy?
It kind of always was. I had a cousin that played called Terry, who was much older than me, and he'll be in his 80s now. Um, but he was my first cousin. He was my dad's brother's son. And like I said, because I was so late in dad's life, his elder brother's son was much older. And Terry was a very good player. He played for, when Liverpool Rugby Club had a good rugby team. He was captain there,
Right.
and him and a bloke called Tommy Brophy both signed for from Liverpool Rugby Union Club for Barrow Rugby League.
Okay.
And I think Tommy Brophy had actually played for England at Rugby Union.
Yeah.
And then Terry moved from Barrow to Hull, where he played for many years and became a bit of, I think, I think he's been in I've seen some of the sort of best ever 13s, and Terry's been mentioned in that. So I was always brought up with that, you know. Always watched Widnes, was mad on Widnes. First hero was Dennis Brown, the winger, and I loved Dennis O'Neill, and I was there when the famous incident where Alec Murphy broke Dennis O'Neill's jaw because
Right.
O'Neill was coming up and displacing Murphy in the England setup.
Yeah.
Um, so it already always been there. Did pretty well at junior school. We played rugby league there then, but when I went to Fairfield, obviously we only played union.
Okay.
And was moderately successful. I captained the school, but I played for. I got some minor representative honours, Merseyside and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Lancashire trials and went on a few coaching courses, but it. I was a big lad, and
Yeah.
then everyone caught up with me. So
Right.
played a little tiny bit for the Wids, but a tiny bit.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
I remember playing in a sevens tournament for the Wids, where somewhere in Lancashire, where the final of that sevens tournament, which we weren't in,
Yeah.
the was a curtain raiser for the Lancashire Cup final at Colts level, where
Right.
Tony Myler played scrum half for the
Yeah.
Wids in that
Yeah.
and got man of the match, and they won it. And that was really about all I ever did at the Wids, just that one, those little bits. I played a
Yeah.
bit for West Bank rugby league team when
Right.
they first set up with an under 16s team, um, and we did okay at that until we kind of did okay against teams that weren't that great, and then we played Holton Hornets, I remember, and it was a bit of a shock to the system because all of a sudden we were playing with lads like Bucky and people like that who went on to be really top notch amateur rugby league players. And
Yeah.
I remember he whacked me in the first 10 minutes, and I probably thought, yeah, any hope that I'm ever going to be any good at this game. So I was kind of all right. I was probably just,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I wasn't. I was probably a better player than I had a heart for. I think that's
Right.
probably fair enough to say.
Yeah.
Um,
I like the way that's put though. That's probably like a lot of people's stories, that Andy, in it. It's like when you've been that kid that can sort of dictate things without probably trying sometimes, and then
mm.
everyone else catches. It is a shock to the system, in it, because you, pardon me, friend, probably had smoke blew up your ass and that a bit.
No, I don't think I ever did. I mean, my dad never watched. The only time my dad ever watched me play was when we played as a curtain raiser to Widnes at Norton Park, and he actually had to. He got a ticket. He never came to watch me. Nobody ever blew smoke up my ass about it. I
No,
think I
no
was kind of.
coaches did it out.
I had a couple of coaches that in union who said, that I had some ability. My problem was I started off in the pack, and then as everyone got bigger, I ended up playing inside centre. I did play in a Lancashire trial um, with where Tony Myler played and Joe Lydon played, and they were either side of me, a year either side of me,
Yeah.
and I did play in that game, and that was like watching, you know, that was like watching something from a different planet for me.
Even at
Um,
that age, mate, yeah. Like you could see levels.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But as I'm sure we'll get on to, in my
Yeah.
opinion, and a lot of other people's opinion, I've never seen another player like Tony Myler. So
Yeah, I've
um,
heard a lot of that, mate. Yeah.
yeah, um, so I liked rugby. I loved rugby. I enjoyed playing it, and then I went to sixth form college, and we played rugby union there against a lot of top schools.
Yeah.
There was no rugby league there at all. In fact, we did play rugby league one day in training, and I got sent off because I broke a lad's nose. Um, because
Just setting the tone, mate, weren't you?
I thought I was a bit more rugby league savvy, and I was than most of them. And they found it kind of difficult to tackle me front on.
Yeah.
And this lad kept tapping me legs, and I lost me ball with it, and I hit him, and I got sent off. So, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't a tough player, and I wasn't a hard man by any stretch of the imagination. I'm like anyone from Widnes. More, I can look after myself, but I wasn't even. If I went out on a Saturday night, I would be avoiding rather than looking for trouble.
Yeah. And so, when you were flicking between the chords, Andy, how did you find the transition from one to another?
To be honest, I always found rugby union a bit easier. I think just simply because you did get the chance to have those rests. In rugby league, you're running up, you're running back, you're running back, you're running forward. And there's that, if you come up against somebody that's going to take you on head on, full on one, and be happy to whack you, I always found that was a bit more. But I enjoyed league a bit more because I played 13 in league. So I was often first or second receiver and often getting the ball. Having said that, I didn't play much. I probably only played, I bet I've not played 40 games of rugby league in my life because it was largely just union. I mean, I would play union for the school on a Saturday morning. When I was in my 5th year, I played union for the school Saturday morning, union for Birchfield on a Saturday afternoon, and then I would go and play for West Bank on a Sunday morning. I played a lot for Birchfield, and I enjoyed playing there. I played centre or fullback for Birchfield, largely second team, though I did play a few first team games for them, and I enjoyed that there. That was a good laugh, and there were some very, very good older players there, who'd played at a better level.
Yeah,
but
but them two positions, mate, are so different, aren't they? For game awareness, for positional play, for how you bring people in and out of the game.
Yeah.
How did you find that?
I think I enjoyed playing at fullback because that, for me, there was a similarity between fullback and loose forward in union and loose forward in league. In as much as you kind of take you can put yourself into the game a bit more where you want to be. You've not got a defined side.
Yeah.
You're not defending in a set position, and you're not running down a guaranteed corridor all the time. And I actually think if you look at Australian rugby league now, and if you watch any of the NRL stuff now, I think what you're seeing from their fullbacks, they've all got these little nippy fullbacks whose job is just to watch what is happening in the game and put themselves into it when they can at top speed. And because they're not marked, they're making massive impacts. I mean, virtually every club has got a little super fast fullback, and I think that's how I was not little and I wasn't super fast, but I would have quite liked to think when I played fullback, I could read the game and put myself into positions to take short balls or go between the centres, create the extra man, come on the blind side. I don't really want to overplay the sort of my rugby prowess because it was okay, but I'm from Widnes and I was nowhere near the top level.
Yeah, but you just know rugby, mate. Basically, that's all you're saying.
Well, I think
you're not making yourself sound like a superstar. You're being pretty honest, but I think a lot of us think we can read a game, Andy, don't we? And it sounds like you've thrived in a free role, mate, like a roaming role.
And perhaps that's why I went on to be a journalist. I went into journalism at 20, as a trainee, and had wanted to. Obviously, there was somebody writing about Widnes at the time already, and I was the kid. And actually, the first game I ever wrote about was the Premiership final at Leeds that Tony Myler won man of the match in. That was the first game I ever wrote about, and I can still remember that the headline was "Widnes by A. Myler."
I like that.
And was probably one of the greatest single rugby league performances that there's ever been. That day, he was remarkable, Tony.
I hear that so much, mate. It's like but in both courts as well, like just an absolute athlete of a rugby player.
Years after, or I can't remember exactly when it was, but I went to the Crest Hotel to watch an after dinner speech, and it was a guy called Cliff Morgan, who had played for Wales at rugby union. He was a rugby union legend, and he was there giving this after dinner talk. And somebody asked him, "Who's the best player you've ever seen?" And he said the best player that he'd ever seen in either code was Tony Myler.
Right, so not many people can't be wrong, can they?
No, so, and I think, but going back to what I was saying is that when I started writing about rugby league, I actually went because someone was doing the first team matches. I used to go and write about 18 games, and so I learned a lot about reading the game and watching the game and what to look for in certain players in certain positions. And
Yeah,
that stood me in much better stead much later in life when I went to work for Widnes.
yeah. So was the ambition leaving school to go into journalism, mate? Is that something
Oh
you
God,
looked at anyway?
no. The only
No.
ambitions I had when leaving school was girls, beer. I had and sport. Yeah, I love cricket as well, and in fact, cricket's now the sport that I love and watch more than anything. I didn't really have any ambitions. In fact, actually, I did theatre studies when I was at sixth form college, and actually did there was a spell where I thought I was going to go and be an actor or be involved in the theatre somehow. But in the end, I kind of lost interest in that, and the
Turn
beer
back
and the
to your
women
love,
took
mate.
over.
Yeah.
But it's ironic,
So
really, that
when,
my daughter's gone into that sort of role.
well, actually, yeah, it's like a sort of full circle, isn't
Get
it?
to generation.
Yeah. So do you, so with you potentially falling out of love with that at the time, do you now enjoy going and watching your daughter do it again? Is it reignited a bit in you, but just to see it rather than be involved?
I love watching her perform,
Yeah.
and she's performed all through her life, and we've always loved watching. I love watching her. In fact, the fact that she's doing something she loves to get and getting paid for it
The ultimate, in it.
is amazing. But I know it's a hard life for her, and I don't really understand. I mean, she goes for so many auditions that they don't get, and everyone that's involved in that life has that. I don't know how you must be really hard as nails to be able to handle that rejection, the consistent rejection.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I agree with that.
I go and watch. I like going and watching live music. I still love
Yeah.
heavy rock music, and I'm still an old rocker, and still go and watch that all the time as much as I can, really.
So just before we move on with your life and career from that point,
Hmm.
with you being down there, has Cornwall not reached out to you?
Well, funny you should say that. So, of
Yeah.
course, first coach for Cornwall was Neil Kelly.
Which is what I thought might have
Yeah,
brought something
And
about.
Neil and I are close friends because I went to work at Widnes largely because of him.
Yeah.
And we became very, very close friends and have remained so and are now. And when he did go down there, don't forget, uh, for me, everyone thinks Devon and Cornwall, but where they train and play is a 2 hour, 10-minute drive for me,
Okay.
which is almost like going from Widnes to London.
Yeah.
So, it's not like it's around the corner.
Yeah.
But what he did do is when they first started and they were having open trials, I was going down there and watching the open trials for him and helping him to sort of identify kids that had bothered to turn up and see who might be worth giving a go to.
Yeah. I think that's why that's triggered me. I think that was reported, wasn't it, that you were helping him out?
Oh, I don't know.
Or
It might have been.
I think
Um,
it was, yeah, because that I've definitely seen something where you were like talent identifying for him.
I did yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember the very first training session. There was a lad from Widnes who'd gone down there, who stood out head and shoulders above everyone, and he did sign for them and was one of their better players in that first year.
It
Um,
was Joe, was it? Joe Purcell.
yeah.
Yeah,
And he had a good trial. There was absolutely no way he wasn't going to get signed on the back of that. And I think it sort of kick-started him, and he's got a bit of a career now. He was at
yeah,
Rochdale, is he at Swinton, or vice versa?
yeah. He's doing well, isn't he? Off it, he's got his opportunity there.
Yeah, he's a good lad.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and so I went down and I spent some time there with Neil, but I was never going to go and work for him. And I said, but I said,
yeah,
if you want me, if you need me for anything, I went and watched a couple of rugby union games for him.
yeah,
Just give me a shout and I'll help you out. I was always willing to do that. But
yeah.
I think it became very clear very quickly that Neil wouldn't stay at Cornwall. I don't think the owner there, who is the guy that owned
Toronto.
Toronto,
Yeah.
his ambition didn't match Neil's. And I
Okay.
think he kind of said very early on that he was quite willing to start again every year, whereas Neil
All
wanted to
right.
to progress.
Build. Yeah.
He was quite happy to just start again. And I think his aim always was, excuse me, to try and just get to a point where they might get a Super League franchise for Cornwall. But I think that's now probably completely unlikely given the IMG stuff.
Yeah.
Although I'm
I
not
don't know if you've seen the rumour, Andy, that he's looking to sell to Bedford the league place.
right, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah,
That wouldn't
well,
surprise
nor
me.
me because he'd done it in the past, hasn't he? Didn't he buy Hamill's
Hemel Stags, yeah. And,
application?
and
Yeah,
and when Neil was there, he turned up a couple of times, but the chief executive, who Neil was having to deal with all the time, was based in Canada. So it was very difficult.
yeah,
And when Neil signed for them, they'd already signed the big lad from Widnes. What
yeah.
was his name?
No, Anthony Malawi.
Yeah. So they'd already
Yeah,
signed Anthony Mullally, and half of the playing budget for that year, or a
one of them.
substantial part of the playing budget for that year, was on him because he'd
Yeah,
been at Toronto, hadn't he?
yeah.
And I mean, but I think Anthony's life had moved on by then. He wasn't really that interested. He was he
Oh,
was he was on the beach, you know.
yeah, yeah,
So whilst I'm sure he would have been a fantastic player for them if they'd have had him all the time.
yeah,
I think that Neil always thought that he would probably rather have spent the money on 4 or 5 players, which he probably
yeah,
could have got. So
yeah,
he would play come to a Thursday and he wouldn't have enough players for the match on a Sunday, and he'd have to phone round the clubs in the northwest and say, "Who've you got that I can borrow for the weekend?"
yeah. No,
And
not
then
yeah.
it's no way to run a club.
No, no. Um, I think,
But
I
they've done,
think,
they've done all right. I think Mike Abbott, who's the coach there now,
yeah,
he's a northern lad,
right,
but he was living down there already. He was a school teacher,
yeah,
and I think they've won a few games, haven't they? And they do
yeah,
all right. They have got a
yeah,
lad there who I think Widnes should have a look at actually,
right,
who is a nippy small fullback, who he scores more tries than he should be doing in that team, kicks
yeah,
goals. And he was a halfback who Neil tried to sign. But he's British qualified,
yeah,
called Cameron Brown. Um, and I really think he'd be the kind of kid that Widnes should have a look at and just say, right, play with that kind of free reign from fullback.
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if another club picks him up, because I think if you look at his stats this year, he's certainly scored more tries than he should have done.
yeah.
Um,
In that environment sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Because I think I like Anthony, mate. I get on with him, but I think he was more. I don't want to really be like out of order with him, but I think the attention that he brought with him, so like
Mm.
Holland and Barrett were with him at the time, and someone else, with all the wellness stuff he does wellness clinics.
Yeah,
So I think more than just Anthony as a player, it's what Anthony could have brought with him.
yeah. I'm
Not
not sure,
justifying it, by the way,
but I'm not sure
but
that they did make the most of it. And
no,
and I'm not being critical of them. I think it's a valid. They've had 3 seasons, so they're giving it a good go.
Yeah.
But I'm not. It was always going to be built on a bed of sand.
No, it was
With
going
it
to be
with
a challenge, mate, wasn't
with
it?
an owner abroad. They've done all
Yeah.
right. They've got decent crowds. I think, and it's a shame because they're just about to get the stadium up and running down there where they were due to play. So,
Right. And
but
it's only a rumour what I said at the minute, but
if it would have been me,
rumours
I'd
don't.
have set it up in Plymouth
Yeah.
because Plymouth is two things. It's a northern city in the south,
Right.
right, and it's got all the squaddies and all the Royal Navy people down
Military, yeah.
there. And I think if they'd have moved, and it's working class, and I think if they'd have moved there, they'd have had all the schools around there that they could have done. I think it would have been a really good place to set up.
Did you know people like yourself? Did the NFL reach out to people like you and ask for ideas?
No,
No.
no. But the last contact I had with them was with the rugby league was probably oh, a little while after I left Widnes. I came up with what I thought was a fantastic structure for the rugby league and how that they could build in both expansion and investment in the heartlands. Because I'm a firm believer that you can't have one without the other. It's a fool's errand to just spend money investing in areas where rugby league isn't played if you don't invest in the areas where it is played, because sooner or later you're going to end up running out of raw material if you do that. And I think you're already really close to losing places like Cumbria and Oldham, where they're not seeing Super League football played in front of them on a regular basis, and you're going to lose all the kids. And I think you might already have done. And I think Widnes is about to fall into that same category.
Yeah. But
Um,
the only thing we've witnessed at the minute, Andy, is Owen is mad keen on the youth, and it's just started back
right?
up.
I know,
Yeah,
yeah, and that's really
yeah,
good. And again, I don't know enough about Widnes at this
yeah,
moment in time, but I came up with this idea and a structure, and it wasn't just have a 20-team league. I
yeah,
did come up with all the ideas of how you could, what the fixtures would look like, how the salary cap would work within it, etc., etc. And I did send it to them, and I had a phone call from somebody who I won't name who
yeah.
said, thanks very much. We'll have a look at it, and that was it. And I've never heard from anybody since. So no, no, but they don't. And I'm still, I was, I do remember one day I had a phone call from Steve McCormack, another good mate of mine. I really like him, and he was down here doing some training with Anthony Atherton and Tony Fretwell, and they came to see me in my office in Exeter, which was fascinating to see 3 lads, because of course they all turned up in training kit,
Yeah.
sat in my office having coffee, and all the women walking in and saying, looking at, who are these lads? But that
Mm.
was quite nice. So, but no, I don't really know that I want to get involved now. I hardly
Mm.
watch rugby league, to be honest.
Yeah,
I don't have Sky, so I watch it when it's on, when I can get it on free view,
yeah.
on BBC. Um, but I'm going to say what a lot of people say is I don't think the standard's anything like it was even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I think the
I
standards
think
dropped.
think the teams all try and play the same,
Hmm.
and the teams that play it the better and stay in the game longer with minimal errors will then go on and win, usually pretty comfortable.
I think John Lawless always used to say to me that the best teams are the ones that can push the rules to the very nth degree. I mean, and Ian Millward was the absolute classic coach for doing that. You know, he was the one who his teams were up to everything that they could get away with, and that's true. Um, but you look now at St Helens, and who've been on top for such a long time, And I watched them the other day. I did see them the other day, and I thought they didn't look half the team that they were even a few years ago. And like the lads that they're bringing through now don't look half the players of the lads that they were bringing through when they were bringing through the likes of Percy and Makinson and people like that. They fitted in straight away. The lads that they're bringing in now just don't look to be of the same caliber. And I think they're really good players. It's interesting how many lads from Britain are doing well in Australia.
Yeah.
Who you never heard of in Britain. You know, they've gone over there before they've had a chance to make it here. The other thing that amazes me is how many Widnes lads are doing well in Super League at the moment.
I know.
And I think, you know,
Luke Chats must have that chat all the time, Andy, mustn't he?
Yeah, and if I was, I mean, I noticed Steve McCurry's lad made his debut last night for Salford.
Yeah.
And Andy Atkins' lad is in that team as
Chris.
well. And the lad on the wing that was at Widnes for a while, and Sid Law played last.
Yeah.
You know, all them lads. And I did say I was talking to Pat Klusky, who I think, by the way, Widnes are fools not to have back running the club, in my opinion. I was talking to him not long ago, and I said if I went back to Widnes now, and this isn't me advertising a job because I'd never want to, the first thing I would be doing is trying to bring back all those lads with the Widnes connections back to Widnes, because that would be a really great way. That would be a great marketing tool. You could sell that to the people of Widnes. We're bringing Widnes back. Yeah. And you know, and you could even look around and say, how would you bring? What about overseas players? Well, you know, go and get Kurt Sorensen's nephew, who's playing for Parramatta or Cronulla, and doing really well.
Penrith now, mate.
Penrith, you know, so you could that would be my aim. I would say, right, how can we get a quick win and bring people back in through the turnstiles? I'd start building that Fortress Widnes thing again. That's what I'd be looking for.
To be honest, mate, I don't think I've seen a connection with an head coach since Neil that Alan's getting now.
And I agree with you. And I've said to Chev a few times, this coach looks like he knows what he's doing. And I think you're right. I think, you know, when Ned came in, the first thing he did was he said, right, I need that, and that. And he did it. Don't forget, when Neil Kelly came in, he was given a 5-year plan to get them back in Super League. And he got them back in the first year. 7th in the first year. Missed 6th by about 2 minutes at the end of that first season. And the board cut his budget for year 2.
Yeah, madness. Really, you know, we should have kicked on, shouldn't we?
Yeah, and that was the start of the decline from that point in time. That was the start of the decline. And I agree with you. I don't think there's been anyone at the club. You know, we've had great people. Frank Endicott, one of the nicest blokes you'll ever meet, but his heart wasn't in it by the time he got to Widnes. Steve McCormack was a real good lad and a good coach.
He was. Yeah, he was great, Steve.
You know, and had a good go at it. But I don't think there was. I agree with you about the connection. I don't think there's been anything for quite a long time, and I think we made some silly appointments as well.
Yeah. Right. We'll roll back then, mate. Sorry, I went off on a tandem on you, but
that's fine.
So when the A League come about then, mate, and you were basically earning your stripes probably at that level, when did it really take off yet? Or would you have been happy staying reporting on the A League?
Oh God. When did it really take off? So I did from 1983 through to 1980, October of 1985. I was at the Widnes World, and it never really kicked off for me there. I was just doing stuff, writing about stuff, anything I could do, and did matches when I could. I used to do a lot of away. I did more away matches because the guy who was the sports editor wanted to do the home
Right.
matches.
Right.
Um, but then I left and I went, and people forget this, but from 85 through to 89, yeah, about 88, 89, I wasn't a journalist. I went off and did PR in Manchester.
Okay.
And then I came back at that point um, where Widnes were just about to be the greatest team that's probably ever played in Britain, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, the sports editor was another Widnes lad called Andy Dunn, who has gone on now to be one of the top sports football writers in the country. But Andy wasn't interested in rugby league. So I came back then as a general reporter and uh, and started doing more and more rugby league. Then got many more because people like Eric Hughes and Mick Adams and people like that were quite good friends with me, and then they were all still involved. I might be a bit
Well,
longer than that. Look, just put it on warm.
yeah. Sorry,
And
mate.
it's all right. And then so I was dead lucky to come into writing about that great team. And
I was gonna say, what a time.
what can you say about that team? And imagine what a team it would have been if Tony Myler had played 30 games a year instead of 15. I
Well,
mean,
Paddy Dowd said that about the famous night at Old Trafford. Really, if Tony would have stayed fit, he wouldn't have got a game.
no, well, that's right.
Yeah.
And of course, Barry was, I think Barry was Barry a year younger than me? Barry and David Hume the same age? I think so.
I'm
And
not
Eddie
sure.
Beckett and all those lads. I think they were all a
Right.
year younger than me. So, but yeah, I mean Barry was a lovely player, wasn't he? Lovely hands, lovely player. But Barry would say to you, you probably couldn't lace Tony Myler's boots. But
He
wasn't it
did say that,
amazing?
yeah.
What amazing that we had people like Barry Dowd and Dave Moran, you
Yeah.
know, who were there both as great standoffs, who would hardly got games because we had these great players there. So yeah, I mean, what a team we had. Martin Fire, no one will ever see the like of him again. I don't care what anyone says. Um, Mick Burke, just it blows your mind when you think about it. And Dougie went off and just brought in players who were old heads just to fill in around those places. And he'd go and if he saw anyone he thought was any good, he signed him. Joe Grimmer, you
Yeah.
know, just amazing, really. But what a team that was, and they uh, that team would often come up against Wigan, and Wigan would beat them because Widnes only had one plan, and that was the way that they played. And every now and again, if a team was very lucky and very organised and had good players, they could they could snuff Plan A out. It didn't happen all the time, but
Yeah.
really there was only one team that could do it. It was Wigan, and they did it a few times. But no one would have gone to watch Wigan ahead of Widnes. Just no one.
Yeah.
And that's why we had all these people coming from rugby union and rugby to watch Widnes all the time, and where we had packed stadiums
Yeah.
all the time. It was just an incredible time to watch them. And
And
I'm at a
would you have
privilege.
been welcomed in as a journalist with open arms, Andy? Was it easy to get a chat with people and that, or was
by
it them
most by
connections that
by
got you
by
in?
by most of them.
Yeah.
By most of them, there were some that were more difficult than others,
Right.
and there was some antagonism. I was a Widnes lad, and so I was around and about. There was some antagonism and some issues with some of the lads. Um, I will say, and I'll admit now, in all my journalistic career, I only regret one thing. There's only
Right.
one thing I ever did that I regretted. I always thought I was fair and honest and wrote well, but
Yeah.
quite early on in my career, when I was trying to make a name for myself, I wrote something about Andy Courier that I regret to this day. And he whenever I fell into a taxi drunk, and Andy was the driver. He always reminded me of it. And I'm probably lucky that he didn't fill me in.
Yeah.
Because what I wrote was unfair. It was unfair, and it was the only time that I ever did it. And it took me years to think about it. And I thought, you know what, I was completely wrong to write that. And he proved me wrong, didn't he?
But at least you can. But at least you can. You confront that though, can't you?
Well, you've
You're
got to,
not
haven't you?
hiding behind it.
You've got to. You've got to
But some
confront
people
all the
don't,
things.
mate.
No, they
It's
don't.
yeah.
They don't. Um, you know, he went on to be a hero in Australia and play in a grand final and played for Great Britain. Well, what did I ever fucking do? Sorry, what did I ever do? I worked for the Widnes World and the Liverpool, and then went on to the Liverpool Echo, where I was rugby writer for years there. But I did get I had a lot of good friends, like I've said before. Eric Hughes and Mick Adams and Mick George and Ian Millward became a real good friend of mine. So it was a good time. Fell out with Ellery Hanley, but that was okay.
You
He
can't be
deserved.
friends with everyone, mate, can
No,
you?
you can't. No. So that's as I say. That's the only regret I ever had is that I wrote something that was unfair about Andy Courier, and if I could take that back now, I would. But other than that, I think I always had a good reputation. I always wrote fairly about things. If a player had a misdemeanor off the pitch, I would write about it, but I had to, you know.
You need your job, correct? That is, isn't it, mate? It's
And
yeah.
sometimes they didn't like it, and sometimes I got confronted at things in toilets and that. But what do you do? What can you do? You can't do it. That goes with the territory.
Good, bad and the ugly, mate, isn't
But
it?
I was the luckiest. I think, if I'm honest, I think I was the luckiest person in the world as a journalist. I spent those early years covering Widnes in the late 80s and early 90s when they were the best team, and then I went to the Echo and I covered Saints when Saints were a copy of what Widnes. Saints under
Yeah,
Millward played like Widnes under Dougie.
yeah.
That it was just they would never say die, the best players. And then I got to know good friends like Paul Sculthorpe and Chris Joynt. I wrote the columns for the Echo for years. Um, very interesting, very interesting. And then, of
So how
course,
did
sorry,
sorry, mate.
go on.
So how did going from the World to the Echo come about? I know they were under the Trinity at the time, weren't they, both papers?
No,
No.
no, it was just that a vacancy came up. Les Woodhead, who'd covered Widnes for many years, was deputy editor on the Echo, and he put me forward, and I got a job on the sports desk there. And writing about rugby was only part of the job. Most of the work I did was laying pages out on the sports desk.
Yeah.
So I did quite a few years there as a freelance and then on staff. Um, and yeah, it was good. I got to do lots of things and go and cover big matches, more World Club challenges um, and enjoyed that life. But at that time, my first marriage was breaking up as well, or did break up, and I moved away for a bit. I went down to Wales and spent a
Okay.
year working on a paper there.
Yeah.
And it was when Widnes got promoted first time, and Neil had come in. That they contacted me and said, "Would you be interested in coming in as media manager?" So I went in as media manager first off, and then after about a year, became football manager as well. So I was working very closely with the team on
Yeah.
making sure everything was running okay for them. I basically was involved in organising everything except on the coaching side, but involved in signing a lot of players, scouting a lot of players. Famously, we took the team to Australia
Yeah.
for the World Club Challenge, World Sevens. People forget we played in the World Sevens.
Yeah.
Took a whole team to play a match a friendly match as pre-season in Australia, and one of the greatest achievements of my life. But I would I would happily say that it wasn't it wasn't a good time for the club.
Right.
There was a lot of animosity, backbiting within the players, within the team.
Okay.
It wasn't as much as there were people at the top of the club who didn't see it as an honour to represent Britain. And we went there, and it cost every person that went £100. Didn't cost the club anything. We didn't. We managed to. We funded it from the match that we played against West. So it wasn't a good time, and it led to a lot of. It brought a few relationships between the players to a head, and I think it probably sealed Neil's fate.
Right. Which is sad, isn't it? So before we go on to the Widnes stuff, mate, how did you find freelancing to being attached, and what are the differences for people that might not know?
Good question, that. Well, freelancing, when you're freelancing, you can work for anyone you want. And often I'd go to a Widnes match and do match reports for 10 different organizations. And actually, when I was attached to the Echo, I was still doing some. You'd get the Daily Mirror phoning you up and saying, "Can we have 100 words?" But I was whenever I was freelancing, I was working for the World. So I'd work Monday to Friday for the World and do a match, and then quite often would go and do a Saturday in the Echo on the Pink, working on the football Pink, laying out the pages and things, or cover a match for them. So the biggest difference between freelancing and being attached to the Echo was the fact that I didn't have to work as hard, because I didn't have to do two jobs. But the pay in those days on the World was so poor.
Yeah.
I was married with a young kid and a mortgage. I would do as much freelance work as I possibly could. I worked, I did quite a lot of stuff for the Rugby League Express and the Rugby Leaguer as well, and that was a labour of love, because they'd want a full page worth of copy.
Yeah.
And only pay you about 10 quid for doing it.
Yeah. It was big though, Andy, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were in those
Yeah.
days. They were in those days. So it was an interesting time, really. I actually did some of the other things I did at the Echo were just as interesting. Like I um, I remember being the editor of and laying out the Grand National Special supplement and doing a lot of writing for that. That was interesting. And I worked on the design for they did a massive supplement about the Bulger trial, and I
Right.
worked on that as well. So I got the chance to work on a lot of different things, a lot of interesting things.
And how do you
Um,
build them connections, mate? Is it in person? Is it how did you find it? Was it easy for you to do, or
yeah, yeah, I don't, yeah. I mean, I never got emotionally attached to it. You find as a journalist, you get quite hard to things. And the other thing is, I was drinking then. Like a lot of people in those days, I was I was a pretty good drinker. I probably achieved the Olympic qualifying standard every day for 30 years. Um, and
the
um,
culture though, mate? No.
it was the
Yeah.
culture, but putting that aside, I was still a good drinker,
Okay.
and too
Yeah.
much. And so really, it wouldn't be a surprise for me to get into the Echo at 6 o'clock in the morning after having been at the grab a granny night at Appleton at the Appleton Club when I
Yeah.
was single. When I was between
Yeah.
wives.
Yeah.
Um, and I not remember anything.
Right.
I'm not
Yeah.
proud of those days.
No, and by the way, I weren't justifying it, but I mean sometimes, like in circles, mate, if you're not in that space, you probably don't get a wild in. Is sort of what I was getting at. So would
A
that bridge
bit,
that awkwardness?
a little bit. I mean, when I
Right.
first started working at the Echo, it would be pub every lunchtime. When I worked at the World, it was pub every lunchtime and pub after work every day.
Yeah.
Um, in the initial first days on the World, on a Friday afternoon, the managing director at the time, used to open up he had a snooker table in his boardroom, and he used to just open the doors. And on a Friday afternoon, we all used to just go in and start drinking. It was a
Right.
real drinking culture then, journalism.
Yeah.
It isn't like that now. I work with a lot of journalists now, or up until recently in my career, and it's not like that now. It's in fact it's frowned upon.
Yeah, it's quite cutthroat, mate, and you've got to be on it all the time.
It's full now of
Yeah,
graduates and enthusiastic amateurs.
yeah. Well, and listen, and I suppose that's what drives the standard makers to carry on making standards, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. So yeah, so that's where we were up to with that. It was just good fun in those days. We had a laugh. We were in a team. It was hard work, as I say. I started work at 6 o'clock every morning
Yeah.
at the Echo. We did 6 to pretty
Right.
much.
So the conversation to come back home comes about what what about that initial chat lifted the mood about coming back and getting back into rugby league?
I think it was Neil. I mean, I
Yeah.
was quite friendly at that time initially with Tony Chambers as well. You
Who said
know,
that was the chairman at the time, wasn't it, mate?
he was the chairman, and
Yeah.
he we had a symbiotic relationship really. He wanted Widnes to be in the public eye, and he loved the limelight himself.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted good access. But the real thing was I was there for the when they announced that Neil was joining, and he was head and shoulders the best candidate. Everyone
Yeah.
knew that he would do a great job. And I went to the press conference in the social club, and he'd read loads of stuff that I'd written,
Right.
and he collared me. I'll never forget because I hate the 40-20.
Right. Okay.
I think it's a crap rule,
Yeah.
and he loved it, and he singled it out, and he said, what about a fit? Because I'd written 40-20. Why not a 50-10? And
Yeah.
he quoted that to me, and I thought, oh, that's clever. And then he said, would you come and work here? And I said, yeah, I would. I loved the time working with him,
Yeah.
and Pat and Rob and Martin Davidson and Tony Fretwell. We had a really fantastic team, and we could have moved mountains. And I think given if Neil had stayed, because Neil's departure came on the back of pressure from people with other egos and other agendas. But I think if they'd have lost that and Neil had stayed, I don't think Widnes would have ever been out of Super League. And I know
Yeah.
that's a big statement.
It's probably a fair one because, like I said, because he had everything other than said egos. He had onside, didn't he?
Mm.
Because people definitely played for him. You couldn't argue that.
Yeah, most people did.
Yeah,
But then,
even though
then,
you didn't see the Monday to Friday, mate, you looked on game day that people were buying in.
but I think what happened was that when you work within a club, you realize that there are certain people, there are players within every club who are only interested in their next contract.
Yeah,
And if they sense that a coach isn't the strongest person in the club, they'll gravitate towards the person that they think is,
okay,
and they'll agitate against the coach.
yeah,
And that was one of the factors that happened with Neil. that there were players agitating against him,
Okay.
and that ultimately,
You're onto a loser then, mate, aren't you?
yeah.
Yeah.
And you've got two options then as a coach. You say, I want to get rid of that person, and
Yeah.
if the chairman doesn't support you in that, then you're finished. Yeah, and so that's what happened.
Yeah.
It wasn't about results,
Yeah.
but
Which
there
is a
was,
shame, really.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it was a great shame. But there was all sorts of things holding the club back. I mean, I don't know if you've spoken with Pat,
No,
and
not yet.
Pat's still involved in the game, so he probably wouldn't be as open
Yeah.
as I might be. But things like Pat and I negotiated a £400,000 sponsorship deal with Tetley's
Right.
um, over 5 years that was knocked on the head by other people within the club because they hadn't done it.
It'll always baffle me that,
Yeah, well,
because obviously for the greater good,
yeah,
it's a good deal, isn't it?
we were this far from signing Henry Paul when Henry Paul was still playing for England at rugby union, and the deal was effectively done, but because we'd had to keep it incredibly secret, his agent had told us that it had to be kept secret. The number of people in the club who knew about it was incredibly small, and the agent had said, "My own, it's all we're going ahead. The only thing that we mustn't do is this mustn't get out, and nobody must approach his rugby union club."
Yeah.
So we went to the board. We had to go to the board and tell them because it was getting very close to the fact that he was about to sign. And somebody with it from the board phoned the chairman of the rugby club up because we were going to have to pay a fee to release him,
Yeah.
and said, "I'm not paying the fee." And the guy from the rugby club just said, "Deal's off." And that was it. The deal was off. Yeah. So, yeah, we were that close. But the number of people we were there was a little spell there where we could see the future. We had with that Henry Paul deal, we'd negotiated as part of it a a weekly column in a Sunday national newspaper to be written by him. Well, it wouldn't have been written by him. I would have probably written it for
Yeah,
him
with
and
his name.
sent it on to him. But
Yeah.
that was part of the contract. They were going to pay us X amount of money for it to fund his contract, and so we'd taken it that far, and you just imagine the level of exposure that would have given to the club. Nonetheless, you're having one of the best standoffs in the world in your team.
Yeah. And all because someone else didn't come up with it.
Yeah, basically.
Basically. Yeah.
Yeah, basically, it was an ego. It
So,
was an ego thing.
yeah. So
Um, yeah,
how do you sorry, mate, how do you get people making you aware of people's availability? Because social media at this point, mate, is in its absolute infancy and probably not even about. So
it wasn't.
how do you go out and about of
You
getting the
know,
feelers out?
all the agents.
Yeah.
All the other football managers within the clubs. Each club does put out a list of who is in contract and out of contract at the end of the year, so you can have a look down that and say, we quite fancy him. Go and have a word. The problem we always had at Widnes was because we were starting to feel like we wanted to shoot high. But if we went in for somebody and Saints went in for them or Leeds went in for them, Saints or Leeds would sign them for less than we could.
No, I knew you were gonna. It's life, unfortunately, but I knew you were gonna say
because for
that.
them to
Yeah,
come to us, it was more of a risk for them.
yeah. And
Um,
the money you'd seal that though.
yeah. So then
Yeah,
we got fed up of signing. We used to call them broken legs. So it was a player who might have a lot of potential, but you're taking a risk on an injury.
yeah,
Classic example being Aaron Moore, you
yeah.
know, who uh, I knew Aaron's agent. Aaron hadn't played for 18 months. I'd seen him destroy St Helens in the World Club Championship at Old Trafford for Melbourne. Hadn't played for 18 months. He had a thing called osteitis pubis, which was a groin thing. And his agent said to me, "Are you interested in Aaron Moore?" So I said, "He's not fit, not played for 18 months." Yeah, but he thinks he might be coming back. So I said, "Well, that's not good enough. We'd
Yeah.
have to have he'd have to undergo a medical." Went through a medical. We signed him. He came over and he wasn't quite ready, and it took about 3 or 4 months to get him ready. Um, he did okay in his first year, kind of okay. Um, and then somebody on the board, we would have probably kept him on. We would have wanted him to stay,
Yeah,
but then someone on the board went and signed him on a 2-year contract without telling. Well, he certainly didn't tell me. He
yeah,
just came in and he said, and I was football manager, and he said,
yeah.
"By the way, we've agreed 2-year contract with Aaron Moore. You'll be happy about that." And I said, "How much for?" And he told me, and I said, "I'm really not happy
You could have said that surely should have come through you,
because
shouldn't it?
that money's got to
Yeah,
come from somewhere out, you know."
yeah.
So we ended up signing play. But Aaron then took his foot off the gas a little bit. And actually, I think Salford got the best out of Aaron Mill. I think he was almost,
I say, I think he had a good spell at
I think
Salford,
he
didn't
was
he?
Super League top try scorer 1 year for them, pretty
Right.
close to if he wasn't, because he was dead keen and hungry and wanted another contract. We went and signed um, Owen Craigie, who he had a terrible reputation off the field, but we knew if we could just get him on the pitch for a year, he'd be amazing. And we brought him in. He was brilliant for 4 games, and then he did what he's done everywhere else he's ever been, and lost it.
He ripped
Um,
Bradford a new arse, didn't he?
yeah, killed him,
Yeah,
killed him. He was like blink your eyes, and he's gone. He's away from
yeah.
you.
He did magic in at some point.
Um,
It,
but it's
but
a very,
on the
very
other hand, though, you signed really well, though, didn't you? Like
yeah,
that Super League team, I ball boyed in 2001.
right,
So I was in and around the changing rooms when that Super League team come. And
right.
how do we get some of them over the line? Because not many of them, like the town, the club down at all, did they? That was like it come across like perfect harmony, really.
We got the best out of some amazing. Neil got the best out. I mean, look at Barry Eaton.
Yeah,
He had a great season. JD, Jason Demetriou, great season. Went on to have great. He was playing for Charlie.
yeah,
Jason.
not
Um,
that.
what was the other lad called? The standoff who was centre. He was such a good player. What was his name?
The Muse.
No, Adam. See, Adam Hughes. There was another lad.
Yeah,
Absolutely massive talent. Massive
yeah.
talent. Massive ego. But a good lad when you could get him to concentrate. No, I'm thinking of the Australian lad with the dark hair. Played standoff or fullback or centre. Oh, what was his name?
Weston.
Yeah, Craig Weston. Great player,
Yeah,
wasn't he?
yeah,
Good player. But they were lads who really had to get the most of. Big Julian,
yeah. I
you
thought
know,
that was good business. Yeah, like
yeah,
looking back now, not as a kid.
Troy Stone, Robert
Troy
Relf,
Stone. Yeah, yeah. Ralphie was brilliant. That pack with McCurry,
Andy Hay,
Farrell, Hay, Frame,
yeah, and Daniel Frame,
Cantillon.
you
Yeah,
know,
it's such a good pack that.
yeah, and you like people like Ryan McDonald who came in and hardly had a game because he was injury prone, but would have been a good forward,
Yeah.
and that was Neil bringing those lads in. That wasn't me. Um,
What's he got about him that sees that, mate?
he's got rugby league in his bones. He was just dad. He just knew it. You know, he went and signed Patch.
Yeah.
You know, who was finished really, and came and had a great time and was a good influence in the club as well. You know, pity we didn't get more out of Carter.
Yeah.
You know, we signed really good, sound players, and we were, as I said, we were ready to kick on, but it just didn't happen.
Yeah. Because it's like there'll be a couple of deals I'll mention to you in a bit, but it's like, but on the back of that, then is the O'Neill story from the tour,
Mm.
and then like you're saying, like there's behind closed doors, like mutiny, basically people clashing with people, and how do you keep a lid on that? How do you go about playing down what Jules done? How do you
Well,
get a team out?
let's start off with when you say what Jules done, because there is only, as far as I'm concerned, two people that know what Jules did,
Right.
and I'm one of them.
Yeah.
And the other one was another journalist who worked called Malcolm Andrews, who is one of the most respected rugby league journalists in Australia.
Yeah.
Right. And we were stood talking to Julian on this boat. There's a big question as to whether or not we should have been on that boat in the first place anyway,
Okay.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
We'd gone up to Macquarie to have a game of golf.
Yeah.
And the it rained and we didn't. And we ended up going out on this boat, which was owned by a bloke who used to play for Rochdale Hornets, a prop forward. I can't think of his name. Anyway, we went out on this boat and we were going round Macquarie Harbour, and they'd all had a few drinks. Now the thing with Julian was, everyone talks about Julian and his famous drinking. Don't get me wrong, it was a nightmare. But Julian wasn't a massive drinker; he just couldn't take it.
So there straight away, there's a discrepancy, isn't it?
Yeah. So Julian was stood drinking out of a bottle of beer on this boat, and he lit up a fag.
Yeah.
And it was a no smoking boat.
Yeah.
Right? I'm talking to Julian, and Malcolm Andrews is talking to Julian. The bloke who owns the boat has got his son dressed up in a polystyrene dolphin costume. Right? And he walks past us. The boat is rocking. Julian stumbles a little bit and then stands up again. That's the absolute truth of what happened with the dolphin.
So it's been dramatised.
Julian then goes outside,
Yeah.
throws a bottle that he's been drinking into the water, takes his clothes off and dives off the boat.
Yeah.
And swims ashore. We're in Macquarie Harbour. We carried on and left him. That caused absolute uproar because one of the players decided to make it into something that it wasn't. The guy who owned the boat completely inflated it because he was coming up to Australia Day weekend. He wanted to promote his business.
Yeah.
It's Julian. We need to remember that. We were in Australia. Julian gets papped all the time. He gets followed around.
Big time, isn't he?
All the time, he's followed around. Yeah. He says, Julian O'Neill tried to set fire to my son. Rubbish. The journalist that wrote it, Danny Weedler, who is on the telly now, phones me while we're heading to the stadium for the World Sevens, and says, "What do you think about this?" And then I said, "Well, didn't happen." And I was fairly disrespectful to him. I said to him, I know what you're trying to get me to say. That didn't happen. I said, I was there, you weren't. So if you want to publish that, that's absolutely fine. But that didn't happen. That's just not happened. I went. It was interesting actually because after I'd spoken to him, I went up to the press box in the football stadium, and Steve Mascord and a few of the other lads, Brad Walter, who were good journalists who I know and have known and still friends with now. I walked in and they said, "Bloody hell, what have you done to Wheedler? He's spewing," you know. And I said, "Well, I've just told him to piss off, basically."
Yeah.
So, so was Julian drunk? Yes. So he'd probably had a sip over 4 pints. Did he try to
Yeah.
set fire to someone? No. Did somebody try to make the most of it? Yes. Did it lead to some of the players, one in particular, trying to cause trouble for Neil? Yes, absolutely. Neil was going to make Julian captain and couldn't after that. Julian ended up turning back up at this pub. We all went to a pub afterwards.
Yeah.
Again, this was organised by one of the players, and they all ended up getting very drunk, except for the ones of us that were driving the minibuses, and we ended up having to drive back. By the time Neil went off then. Neil made his own way back from Port Macquarie all the way down to Foster, and left me and John Myler and Brian to sort it out, which we did, and Rob the Rub, and we sorted it out, and we got them all back. And the next day, Julian apologised for what he'd done, and it was a few days later that the story came out in the Sydney Morning Herald. So, how do you deal with it? Well, you can't really. I could deal with the media; that's not a problem. But I couldn't deal. What I couldn't deal with was one of the other senior players writing a letter to the board, the people on the board of directors that were already having a clash of ego with Neil, complaining about it.
Yeah.
So,
That's piss poor, isn't it?
and that's why you lose a lot of trust with some of the players, and that's
Yeah.
where your coach has to say to the chairman, I can't have that. I can't have that.
Yeah. And Giles didn't have the best of times in Widnes. He lost a little one, didn't he? And he had a bit of a shitty time at Widnes, didn't he?
Well, the child had died in Australia, not
Yeah.
in Widnes.
All right.
Um, Jules came to Widnes and did really well second time around for us, and it was dead funny that again there was some real antagonism towards him. A lot of it actually came from the wives who didn't like each other. You know,
Right.
but I remember him saying he's always pissed. He's always pissed. I'll tell you what, on a Monday morning, he always out trained them
Yeah.
because he actually wasn't that drunk.
Yeah.
He appeared it.
Yeah.
The sip over the fourth or fifth pint finished him.
Yeah.
Just finished him. But do you know what though? In Australia that time, we went when we were in Sydney for the World Sevens. I met up with John Lawless and Ian Chavot, who were out there to watch that and to watch the game in Foster. And there was a cricket match on in Australia against Pakistan. And on the morning that we had training, so it was the morning of the day before the World Sevens. And the day before, so they'd trained, and Julian got pulled for drugs testing, random drugs testing, random, but they pulled Julian, you know. And he said to me, "I'm supposed to be going to watch this cricket this afternoon. I've got tickets. Do you want tickets?" And he went across the state, the whole of Sydney, to get tickets. And he gave them to me and John and Ian, and we went and watched this cricket game. He was good. I had a lot of time for Julian.
Yeah.
Flawed that he is, flawed character that he was. I don't know what he is now, but I had a lot of time for him, and it's a shame that others didn't have the same amount of time.
Yeah, and he was unreal to watch. One, you can't doubt that. The one deal I did want to mention, mate, was Peachy.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, that, because I'd left the club then,
Right.
but I was involved in that.
Yeah.
Steve
How
McCormack
like
was the coach at the time.
how big was that? That was massive, though, wasn't it?
So I was trying to negotiate that for him to come while Frank was still there.
Mm.
And obviously we got relegated, and I was the first casualty. They made me redundant straight away.
Okay.
Um, but we'd kind of come to an agreement with him. Anyway, his agent, who was a friend of mine, contacted me and said he'll still come if you want. And I said, well, I'm not there anymore, but I do know Steve McCormack, and I'm still writing stuff. I can put you in touch if you want. And it went ahead, and he still came. But then, from what I understand, and I wasn't involved, so this is kind of third hand, although I think it's
Yeah.
quite accurate. His father died, and
Okay.
he had to go home. So he
Right.
went home, and he went home for 2 weeks, and Widnes docked his wages.
I heard it was money, but you never get the proper side, do you?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah,
And Widnes docked his
that wouldn't
wages,
shock me.
and then that was the end. He wasn't going to come back after that, was he? But he was again. So Peachy, Owen Craigie, great signings, great signings. I mean, the two signings that I was really heavily involved in that probably give me the most interesting were Salah Falongo
Yeah,
and Justin Murphy.
right.
Justin, we were desperate at that point. That was when Frank was thing, and we were desperate for players. And I spoke to somebody in Australia, and they said, "What about Justin Murphy?" I said, "Oh yeah, I like Justin Murphy. He just had a great season with the New Zealand Warriors, but they hadn't extended him." He said he's in
Right.
England at the moment, and he was playing in the Twickenham Sevens tournament, rugby union.
But I was like a guest player.
Yeah.
All right.
So I managed to find him and contact him in his hotel room. And I said, the thing is, you're going to have to get a visa to come over and play for rugby league. You can't do it on as a guest. So we
Yeah,
sent him to Dublin because he had to be out of the country to apply for the
yeah,
visa. We, Derek Twigg, the MP, put us in touch with someone in the embassy, the British embassy in Dublin, who helped him apply for a visa from Dublin. He got his visa issued in Dublin, and he came across and played, and he did really well for us. And then obviously went to France and was Super League try scorer of the year the following year.
yeah,
Another one who would have been a great signing. And of course, Salah was born and brought up in New Zealand, and when he was a young man, had been involved in something quite bad. I think he might have ended up with someone dying, and I think he might have done some time for it. I don't think
right.
it was murder or anything; it was accidental.
Yeah,
And loads of NRL clubs had wanted to sign him, but he couldn't get into Australia.
good.
So Salah went because he was of Samoan descent. He went and applied for a Samoan passport and a slightly different name, and then pitched up at Wigan of all places. And
Yeah,
Wigan tried to register him, but someone from New Zealand put the knife into him, and the rugby league wouldn't register him. So he ended up coming to us, and Frank said, "He's a good player, this lad. I'd like to sign him." So I went to the rugby league and I sat with them and I argued that that they were discriminating against him because all they could do was look at the passport and the visa to play. If they were saying he wasn't who he was, then they needed to tell the authorities that he was here under false pretenses. But that isn't their job. They should be registering a player on the basis of is he eligible on the evidence that he can provide, and here's the evidence. Anyway, they had to give in, and we signed him.
right.
But he was here on a holiday working visa. Now the thing with a holiday working visa was you had to be under a certain age. You couldn't be married and you couldn't have kids. So Salah was training, and then one day, after about 3 weeks, this woman and all this tribe of kids turn up with and I said to Sala, who's this? Oh, it's my wife and kids. I said, Sala, you can't do that. So we kind of kept quiet about that.
Yeah.
It 2 years, Sala, but the thing is, his wife had come over on a holiday permit, which was 3 months.
Right.
And I believe when his contract ended, again, I'd left, but when his contract ended and he tried to go home, two things happened. One, New Zealand authorities wouldn't let him back into New Zealand because he was on a Samoan passport. And two, his family turned up at the airport and were all held for being overstayers on their visas.
It's
So at
mad,
that
isn't
point,
it?
at that time, or in the build up to it, see, the other things I'd done was Daniel Frame and Julian O'Neill. I've got them both British citizenship, so they didn't count. And the players used to call me Loophole because I used to be able to find ways of getting players that we probably shouldn't have been able to either sign.
Yeah.
But they were both quite good fun. I quite enjoyed
That
it.
was brilliant. That, yeah.
But I'm glad
And
you brought
and
Peachy up because I think he was a great signing.
yeah, and there's so many moving parts, Andy, that you don't appreciate to get something done.
Yeah. Oh no, it's and the other thing people don't think people think oh it's like your perfect job. I think it actually killed me off. I almost stopped supporting Widnes after, and it wasn't
Yeah,
anything to do with being made redundant. It was the players. Neil said to me very early on, "Don't fall in love with the players because they'll break your heart,"
it did.
and it kind of did because you realise how many of them are assholes.
That's a shame.
And a lot of them aren't. Some really
Yeah,
nice lads,
yeah,
David Mills, Stephen Myler,
yeah,
people like that. Daniel Framer, I read a lot of time for Daniel. Um, and but some of them were just assholes,
yeah.
really.
Tosspots. So if you
Oh,
could sum your time up with Widnes, mate, how would you sum it up?
oh, I think we were on the verge of something big,
Yeah,
but I think we were always doomed to failure.
you were sort of yeah rocking an hard place, weren't you?
We were going like that. And again, Neil was very astute. He said it'll go well as long as the board are prepared to run as fast as we want to go.
Yeah.
And
He
and they
sounds such a wise fella.
yeah, he was. And again, someone on the board once said to me, when I was working all the hours that God sent, because obviously I was finding players in Australia, so I was working
Yeah,
at night when they were,
yeah,
and what someone on the board said to me, you don't work for the club, you work for Neil Kelly. And I said, well, I don't think that's true, but there you go.
well, to be quite honest, Neil is the club at that point. So
He,
that's an irrelevant statement because your head coach is your main boy, isn't he?
he had to, well, he has to be, but
Yeah,
I think that was that he took that role off somebody else, and they didn't like it.
yeah. Okay. Um, yeah, well, it's funny. So, as a group of mates from the Wids, we went on a random weekend to Romania and
Yeah,
we actually bumped into
bumped into him.
Neil.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I remember him telling me.
yeah, and we were looking and it was like, so the European League is like a B League, for
Yeah,
Romania, Georgia,
yeah,
and it was like around the Six Nations, and a couple of the lads went and watched Georgia because it was buttons, and we
mm,
stayed in the pub and watched England, France, and then all of a sudden the Georgians walked in.
right,
It must have been where they went back after the game for
right,
food and that. And then when we went out, Neil was going in.
yeah,
We were like, Neil, and we all had the picture with him. And that. I think
yeah,
Streety might have been with us at the time,
yeah.
Neil. And
I went,
we had a
I went
picture
and
with
met up
him.
with him when Romania played in the World Cup here. Um, they were based at Exeter, and
Like,
and I went and met up with him at the hotel and had a drink with him.
yeah, it
I've
was just
seen
a
him quite a
class
few
surprise.
times.
Yeah.
I went to Belfast when he was at Ulster as well, and met up with
Yeah.
him there.
Oh,
So
brilliant. And
we're good
how
lad.
good is it that your relationships far outlast and outweigh the sport itself?
That some of them have been fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
life enhancing. I mean, the relationship I've got with Ned, still, we're not in each other's pockets. He lives the other end of the country, but we're still in regular touch. And those relationships are beneficial to your life.
So where did life take you after Widnes, mate?
All sorts of places, really. I ended up going back into PR.
Yeah.
In the NHS for a while. And then because of that, I did quite well in that. And then I got offered a job down here. Second wife is from Devon anyway.
Right.
So we relocated with that job. I didn't last long in that. I didn't like the organization I was working for. And I ended up going into the police, working in communications for the police. And
Yeah.
then from that, I went into working for the Police and Crime Commissioner, so working in political communications. And I did that
Right.
until 2 years ago when
Okay.
I got made redundant. I was 58 then, um, no, 59. And I'd got offered redundancy and I took it. And then for the last couple of years, I've had my own little consultancy, doing a
Right.
lot of work on uh, community safety and doing a lot of work working with the nighttime economy and helping women be safer at night. That's been really
Yeah.
interesting and very rewarding.
Yeah.
Um, so that I've done that. I've been a trustee of a greyhound rescue charity. My drinking days are behind me. I've not had a drink for 11 years.
Oh, congrats, mate.
I lost 11 stone.
Yeah.
Um, I've run I've run some. I did when I first started. I did some pretty good 10Ks and 5Ks, and I did a triathlon.
Mhm.
Um, I'm in the gym. If I was in the gym when I was 16, if I'd have spent as much time in the gym as I spend now,
Yeah.
I might have made it.
But you know what, mate? What a journey, though.
Yeah, yeah.
So everything happens for a reason. I believe, Andrew, to be honest, mate, like what's meant to be will be, and everything
And
does
going
happen
back
for
to
a
saying
reason.
about the Andy Courier thing again, and sorry to
Yeah.
bring that up again, but I think
No, it's
not
all right.
drinking and 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 uh, and the change in my life and the way I think about things since I stopped drinking. Um, I think that played a part in me coming to terms with the fact that I did do something that I regretted.
Give
You
you
know.
clarity.
Mm.
Yeah. No, good, like good on you, mate. It's not an easy thing to do and to admit to either. It's I think it's like it's great here.
Nah, I
But
don't want it.
again,
I'm not.
it's
I'm not. I'm not. I'm not. I'm not doing it to sort of people say, "Oh, well done." I'm
oh
doing
no,
it
it's
because
just
I
a
think
lesson
actually
learned.
I'd love to meet. I'd love to fall into his taxi now
Yeah.
if he's still
And hopefully
driving
not
home
fill you in.
and say to him, "I'm really sorry."
Yeah. Well, if he listens or watches this, mate, you're available for the chat, aren't you?
Yeah, anytime. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Right, so I've got a few daft questions for you.
yeah.
So back in the rugby days, mate, off the field, how did you have any pre-match superstitions before games?
At least 4 pints. But
Yeah.
playing, you mean? When I played,
Four? Four?
um, when I played, I always wore Walsh boots.
That was the make, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I wouldn't. I
Yeah.
don't think I'd have played
Right.
if I hadn't have had Walsh boots. I loved them. But did I
Mm.
have any pre-match superstitions? No, not really. Not really. When I was when I started watching rugby, and I
Yeah.
wasn't writing about it, I used to go with my brother quite a bit, and my brother's a lot older than me, so
Yeah.
it was really something we had in common. And I used to love going for 4 or 5 pints before the game on a Sunday. I loved that.
Yeah.
Um, I used to like standing behind the sticks.
You do see the game different, don't you? To be fair.
And I think that's one of the things why I learned how to spot a player.
Yeah.
I didn't like sitting in the press box very much, and quite
Right.
often I wouldn't. Even when I was writing, I would
Yeah.
stand up behind the sticks. I liked standing behind the sticks.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I'm not a superstitious person. Sorry, that's a boring answer, isn't it?
No, no, mate, that's fine. It's not for everybody. To be honest, it weren't for me, if I'm honest, mate. But this next word I'm going to say is a different definition for everybody, Andy. So the toughest player that you've been involved with and against.
I played against Lee Crooks when I was at school. He was
Yeah,
2 years younger than me, and he battered me.
right. He was a baller though, wasn't
He was massive.
he?
He was
Yeah,
14. I think I was 16. Um, I think that would be as hard. That and as I said earlier before, Mike Buck hit me once, and I'll never forget that. I've still not forgot that. Um, he didn't. I don't think he ever turned pro, but it was a. I'm amazed. But he played Great Britain, Barley.
yeah,
He was a good player. He was a strong lad. He hit me hard. Yeah, so that was quite good. But Lee Crooks, I played against rugby union against him
right.
at school, and he
Yeah.
he battered me. He battered me. Um, I think I'll tell you, who was the hardest player I've ever watched on a rugby field. Truly tough. Right, I know who it is. He actually thinking about it, no shadow of a doubt, Eric Hughes. I don't think there was a harder player ever. And when it came to the big matches, he was so hard, and he didn't look it, and you wouldn't have thought it, but no one wanted to play against him. No one wanted to play against him. He was rock hard.
Yeah. Your favourite away ground?
Favorite away ground. I've got some that are definitely not my favourites.
Yeah.
Hated Hull
Do you prefer
KR.
the old stadiums, mate? Like the original stadiums, or do you like the new ones?
I don't mind. I think it's the future comes. I don't hanker after the past. Future comes, and you have, and we've got better facilities now. I don't miss those toilets at the Lower House Lane end of Norton Park. That's for sure. We're, you know, and I would have hated to have been a woman having to go.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Um, but the Oldham's ground was terrible. And OKR's ground, boy, that's quite. I remember that day that lad, the Australian lad, we played up there, and he didn't come out after half time because he'd got hypothermia. I think his name was Lydiard or Lingard. Um, my favourite away ground. That's a really. I'll tell you what I love. All right, okay, here's one. I used to love watching from the side at Fartown, Huddersfield,
Right.
because the terracing was so high, and I
Yeah.
was I wasn't very old, and so you could always see above people's heads. I loved that was a good ground. That was a great ground for watching rugby league, a proper old ground,
Yeah.
and I saw some absolute battles there. Um, so I really liked it there. Um, and I think Leeds has always been a good ground on it, Headingley.
It's a popular one, I think. Yeah.
But Wilderspool, yeah, hated it. Knowsley Road wasn't bad.
Yeah. Good
Knowsley Road.
atmosphere, Knowsley Road, actually, I thought.
Swinton was a great ground years ago. Had a
Right.
brilliant pitch, lovely pitch.
Yeah.
But if I had to choose, I'll stick with Huddersfield just because of the
Sure.
viewing. It was great
Yeah.
for viewing.
So if you could go back and tell a younger Andrew something, what would it be?
Don't drink.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough.
I would be dead now if I hadn't stopped drinking.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
and it's a dangerous thing to if you're not able to control it, and a lot of people can't.
Yeah.
Um, I would I then then it's a very dangerous thing. And I've no absolutely, yeah. I'm really, really not proud of who I was when I drank.
And
So
if the
that would be
microphone, yeah,
that would be
no,
that
that
would be
that seems very valid because from throughout the chat, your clarity has come since that is no longer a part of who you are.
a lot of it has, yeah.
Yeah. So if a microphone ended up in your hand, mate, what would you give us?
What do you mean? How do you mean?
Karaoke wise.
Oh, a singing.
Yeah.
I've got a great voice.
Yeah.
What would I sing? I'd, there's a band. There's a band called the Zach Brown Band. They're an American country rock band,
Yeah.
and they do a lot of really fantastic songs, and I absolutely love their music. And they do a song called I ain't in no hurry today," and there's a line in it that says, "The dreams that I borrow can wait till tomorrow because I ain't in no hurry today." I'd sing that.
Yeah. I like it.
Or
I like
"Daydream
it.
Believer" from the Monkees.
Which is also a tune. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to, mate, a 1 to 13 that you've been involved with.
Burke,
Yeah.
wing, a fire, right.
Yeah.
That's Stuart Wright, by the way.
Yeah.
Lydon, Hughes, Myla Gregory,
Yeah.
Mills Mackenzie Sorensen,
Yeah.
Adams, Leal, Lawton. That's me 1 to 13.